The fragile ceasefire between Iran and the US is now facing its toughest test yet, a high-stakes dispute over uranium enrichment. Iran insists that it has a right to enrich. White House says that this is a red line. And this is Trump's red line against Iran nuclear enrichment, which stands despite the ceasefire. Now, Iran had earlier published a 10-point plan that suggested US would recognize Iran's right to enrich uranium. Iran maintains that this was a very essential aspect of those 10 points. But the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, rejected this claim. Not just her, also the vice president of the US, J.D. Vance. They rejected this, saying that the Iranians had put forward a plan on the basis for a ceasefire, and that differs from the framework that was acceptable to the US initially.
The president's red lines, namely the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran, have not changed. And the idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd. The president will only make a deal that serves in the best interests of the United States of America, and he as a negotiating team will focus on this effort over the next 2 weeks.
Trump has insisted and says that Iran would cease its enrichment of uranium and proposed a solution to retrieve its 440 kilograms stockpile of highly enriched uranium. He posted on his Truth Social platform, "There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will be working with Iran to dig up and even remove all of the deeply buried nuclear dust." And this is from the attacks this year and, of course, from last year as well. Trump was apparently referring to the aftermath of last year's strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. However, Tehran says that the right to enrich uranium is non-negotiable. Iranian parliament speaker Ghalibaf claimed that the 6th clause of Iran's 10-point proposal recognized Iran's right to enrichment. Ghalibaf added that this amounts to a violation of the truce. US Vice President J.D. Vance replied to Ghalibaf's statement, drawing an analogy between his claim and his wife's desire for skydiving. It may be a desire, but it doesn't mean that she should be doing it. That's what he's implying. Listen to this for yourself.
The second thing Ghalibaf said, which again I found fascinating, is he said, "We refuse to give up the right to enrichment." And I thought to myself, you know what? My wife has the right to skydive, but she doesn't jump out of an airplane because she and I have an agreement that she's not going to do that because I don't want my wife jumping out of an airplane. We don't really concern ourselves with what they claim they have the right to do. We concern ourselves with what they actually do. And I think the president's been very clear on the enrichment question.
All right. Under earlier agreements, Iran had agreed to limit its uranium enrichment to 3.67%. That was part of the JCPOA, a level suitable for civilian energy, but far below weapons grade. However, according to UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi, Iran has nearly 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, which can be turned into weapons grade in a matter of weeks. He had earlier said most of it was stored in a tunnel complex at Isfahan and is probably still there. All right, viewers, on Point Counterpoint today, we look at the uranium enrichment in Iran, US red line versus Iran's right to uranium enrichment. Let me quickly introduce our guest who's joining us. Pleasure to be having Dr. Tara Karta with us, former director of the National Security Council Secretariat and former senior fellow at the US Institute of Peace. And I'm also joined by Alex Trayman, CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of Jewish News Syndicate. Welcome both. And I'll start with Dr. Tara Karta. The right to uranium enrichment. Well, for civilian purposes, it is a right. And as one of the initial signatories to the NPT, Iran would have that right. For the US, it is a complete lack of trust. And there have been reports in the past from Rafael Grossi as well, suggesting that Iran has gone way past that 3.67%. Dr. Tara Karta, how do you see this?
See, under the NPT, then, like you said, there is the right to enrich, and there is no actual word in that saying how much you can enrich. You cannot enrich to weapons grade. That is the understanding. The problem is that when prior to all this, before the JCPOA was signed, and Iran was part of the non-proliferation treaty, it was alleged that Iran was not keeping to it. I mean, that was the whole idea for the JCPOA. Right, the joint declaration which Biden kind of put in place, that they were bypassing these rules and this thing, and that was the problem basically. Now the thing is, I mean, you may have reservations on XYZ, and thereafter the JCPOA was signed, which gave not just extensive rights of to the International Atomic Energy Agency, it also redesigned much of Iran's projects, its centrifuge capabilities. All of this was redesigned to make sure that it cannot break out. If at all it break out, it will take 1 year. I mean, the whole key issue was how long would it take for Iran to break out. So all that was put in place, and then President Trump, for reasons best known to himself, withdrew from the JCPOA at a time when the IAEA had given its report saying Iran has kept to its deal. It has kept to 3.27. It has not violated that. So that is your first problem. I'm not sure why he would do that at all. So to summarize very quickly, from a point where Iran had no nuclear enriched material at all for a weapons grade system, now you have a state which is saying, I have the right to enrich. So it's actually a regressive step.
Alex, let me come to you next. Very quickly, just to add to what Dr. Tarakarta ended with, the JCPOA, Trump had abandoned it in 2018. Then last year, in the middle of diplomacy, an attack was carried out on Iran. It was called a preemptive strike. This year, again, in the middle of diplomacy, 3 rounds were complete, the 4th was scheduled, and then the war started on the 28th of February. At that time, in the last round of talks, Iran had agreed to even give up whatever they have enriched so far, but now they seem to be more adamant in retaining whatever they have created in terms of that enriched uranium stockpile. Let me come to you. Do you feel this red line is being drawn out of blood or out of insistence, more out of reason then?
Well, I think that for President Trump, he's willing to enter into a 2-week ceasefire to see, who he's dealing with inside of Iran, to see, number one, if they have the power to reel in all the ballistic missiles being fired, and to see whether they want to be a reasonable actor on the world stage that recognizes that the Islamic Republic has violated every standard that it was supposed to adhere to under the nuclear agreements, both the non-proliferation treaty and the JCPOA that Trump withdrew from. If they are going to hold fast to their red line that they are drawing in the sand, that they have a right to enrich, then President Trump and Israel are going to know that this is not a regime that can be worked with. And I think that's why you have a limited 14-day period for a truce. And I believe very strongly that President Trump and Israel will continue the military operations if they feel like they do not have a regime that is in place today that is any different than the regime that they are trying to remove with the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the top leaders of the Revolutionary Guards.
Alex, there is a lack of substance when one says that Iran was going past the weapons grade. Yes, there is a statement from Rafael Grossi, but when a war is started because the US president had a good feeling that there was an imminent threat, even though the Pentagon says there wasn't one, and 18 agencies, as per Joe Kent, did not say there was a threat or an imminent threat from Iran, that creates problems or that raises more and more questions. And I'll go over to Dr. Tarakarta before we run out of time. Dr. Karta, do you feel this war is, as the objectives have remained a question so far, but as far as nuclear enrichment is concerned and whatever stockpiles have already been created by Iran, will they allow the Americans to take it after all that has already happened? Where does this even go from now?
See, let's make it one thing clear. No one wants Iran to go nuclear. And that really includes all of us, right? So that is the basic point. But having undergone all this and having been repeatedly betrayed by the United States, which state in its right mind will want to give up its nuclear, whatever enrichment it has? Now, this 60%, for it to go up to 90% requires much less time. That is a fact. In terms of separative work units, you call that the number of centrifuges being used. But the thing is, they need to get those centrifuges running. And the IAEA report of May 2025 says all of them were destroyed in June. Significant damage. So centrifuges are extremely delicate. They are not instruments you can just, start off and say, okay, here we go. It's been very badly destroyed. However, will it retain the capability down the line? Who knows? I don't know. So that opening is there much years down the line. But meanwhile, I think that offer which they made of blending existing enriched uranium into regular fuel for peaceful nuclear energy, at least that should be explored.
Alex, let me come to you. When all of it was pretty much obliterated, or any of those adjectives that Donald Trump uses last year, I'm talking about the enriched uranium stockpiles in Natanz, Fordo, Isfahan, what is the cause of concern now? Has it not been destroyed? Is it an acknowledgement of that? Or even if it has been, it needs to be picked up? What is the cause of concern, and where does this go from here, in your perspective?
I think the understanding is that the enriched 60% uranium has not been destroyed, and Israel and the United States were careful not to destroy it in order to create some kind of radioactive event inside of Iran. They want to make sure that very sensitive material is disposed of or moved in the safest way possible. And they also do not want to give this regime the opportunity to go in, find that enriched uranium, and to restart their nuclear program. And we already saw after the 12-day war in last June that Iran did take steps to try to restart their nuclear program. So meanwhile, the United States and Israel feel that they are working, negotiating with a malign actor. They are waiting to see whether Iran will recognize that their pursuit of nuclear weapons, their building of ballistic missiles, and their funding of terror proxies all across the region have left Israel and the United States with no choice but to attack, and they want to see that Iran is going to give up on all three of those agendas in order for them to release sanctions and to believe that they have a peaceful neighbor in the Middle East.
Alex, I hear all your points, but that basic argument still pertains, and this is not anyone. This is just a perspective. This is just a reiteration of facts, that Iran was willing to give up whatever they had enriched, and this was during the diplomacy and the third round of talks that were mediated by Oman, and it is in the middle of that the war started. So that diminishes a certain sense that there was an imminent threat. But again, that argument always remains that there is a lack of trust, and Iran is saying one thing and doing another. There is no counter to that. Whether it would have happened or not, there's no counter to that either. We leave it there for now, but what happens next, we need to watch, because this ceasefire seems to be devolving faster than it evolved. That was Dr. Tara Karta joining us from New Delhi, Alex Raymond joining us from Jerusalem. Pleasure speaking with you both.
Thank you.